conversation. Cool conversation. Cool conversation.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of Miss Hennessy Speaks TV, the interview series right here. And I guess kicking off one of the new arms of my interview series. This is called Cool Conversations, and it doesn't get any cooler than this man right here. I've been trying to speak with him for quite a while now, but not because he doesn't want to. It's just because he's been so busy creating and doing what he does best. This is Luka Lesson, poet, hip hop artist, creative, author, and just an all round incredible magical artist that I'm just really grateful to have in this space. Welcome, Luka. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here and finally having this chat with you.
Absolutely. Now we've known each other for not too long, but long enough to be able to appreciate the love of creativity and of course within the hip hop realm. But it's not just hip hop for you, it's creativity for the culture that you represent so richly, an incredible Greek poet, can we say playwright, author? There's so many names I want to throw at you, but I put
I
you
don't
under
know.
this
I
magical
It's a good
umbrella.
place to start the conversation actually because I have started just using the word poet, and
Wow.
some people kind of might see that as limiting, but I see that I approach everything as a poet, and however I think the thing that I'm making deserves to be in the world, then I push it into that direction. So if that ends up being a book, then it's a book. If it ends up being a theater stage show, then that's what it becomes, or an album, or a single, or I don't know, a blog post, or yeah, whatever it might be. I just approach everything as the word poet, I think really encapsulates kind of what it is that I do.
Yeah.
And it takes different forms. So yeah, I've now written something that is being performed in theaters and it's being seen as like a musical theater show, or this term actually that I first heard in Sydney at the show that you saw, someone called it gig theater, where it's like a theater show,
Oh,
but it's also a band kind of playing,
yeah.
which I hadn't heard of before. But yeah, so now I guess I'm also maybe could be called an actor in some way or a storyteller or I don't know,
A
like whatever.
thespian.
I
The
just,
word
I just, yeah,
thespian.
I just want to tell stories in the best way that they can be told. And sometimes that means that the subject matter I'm dealing with calls for it to be a high energy rap song, and sometimes it calls for it to be a really gentle poem,
Yeah.
or really gentle rap song and a really high energy poem, or like anything, any of the things along the spectrum of which I just call poetry.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And at the moment, I'm writing something that's like a book, a non-fiction book,
Wow.
uh, and that also feels poetic. I just approach it, every line is like a little poem type thing
Yeah.
leading on to the next one. And I just like the craft of writing and creating and sharing and performing. And in some ways, I guess I'm honoring my ancestors that were the poets that first told stories or performed epic
Oh,
poetry from memory of the Iliad or the Odyssey or other ancient Greek epic poems or of the whole Mediterranean. Because I did my DNA test recently and it's it's not just Greece. Um, so so yeah, I just see myself as honoring that history in any form that it comes.
yeah. Well, look, you honor it so well, and yeah, I guess what I get why you'd feel, or why some people might feel that the word poet is limiting, but there's so many arms to that title, right? And
Mm.
if anybody had the absolute pleasure of seeing your current um theatre works that we were talking about, agape, and other forms of love. It was soul stirring. I know for myself, I'd never ever seen anything within the Greek theatre um, uh, realm before. I've never been to Greece, but I felt that watching you and being in the audience with that show was the closest I would get to Greece in Australia. So it was transformative, and it was something that I'm so grateful that I was able to take my kids to see, that my husband got to see. I was able to tell so many friends about it, and will continue to tell because I know that you're traveling with it as well. You'll be doing some shows in Melbourne, is that correct?
Yeah, we did Gold Coast show, Sydney shows that you were able to see, and now we are heading next to Adelaide and
Okay.
then Bendigo and then Melbourne. So in May, 3 weekends in May. So I'm doing Adelaide first and then I'm heading to stay in Melbourne for a couple of weeks. And while I'm there, I'll do a Bendigo show and then a Melbourne show at a really dream venue called the Athenaeum, which is really beautiful, kind of old Grecian style venue in the middle of Melbourne, which is really beautiful. So yeah, that's a bit of a dream come true to do that show. And then from there, we're doing a show in Byron
Mhm.
uh, at the very end of Byron Writers Festival in August. And we'll see where we go from there. It's a very strange time to be an artist in Australia at the moment. I
Why
think that a
so?
lot of
Why
people
do you
have
say
kind
that?
of yeah, a lot of people have kind of moved on from the pandemic and they're back at work and they're kind of living their lives, but the arts industry has not really gone back to normal.
Yeah,
Um, if there was a normal, there's definitely no kind of going back. It's a new normal, people say, and it's very different. And there's a lot of risks and potholes and
right.
things to figure out around it at the moment. And so that's part of the reason why we're doing a bit of a slow tour. We're taking our time with it and I just think the show is powerful and I believe in it and I've thrown my all behind it. And I just feel like it needs to be out there in the world. And the more we can do that, the better. So we're
I
persevering
couldn't
with the process and we're finding a way.
I couldn't agree with you more. Like I said, it was something I'd never really experienced before, and I think the first time I saw it was on the steps of the New South Wales Art Gallery, and really that was really magical. I think it was the time of afternoon
Mm.
that you decided to do it. It was obviously being at the foot of those really awesome stairs. I mean, it's awe inspiring, the building in itself, but
Yeah,
to
it looks like a Parthenon.
yes,
It's got that ancient Greek vibe. That's why we chose to do it there.
it really did, and I think that was the initial wow, that sort of yeah, sort of takes your breath away. But then, obviously, as as you delve into the performance, I mean, this isn't something that you've just written, oh, I know I might just decide to do this. I mean, there was a labor of love behind this entire
Mm.
project, and it probably would
Oh,
have taken quite some time to get to where you got to. So can we explore that a little bit? What made you decide to explore agape and
yeah.
other types of love?
Yeah, so I knew somehow from a young age that the ancient Greeks had many different words for love. I didn't know much more than that. And then I was living in Melbourne and I thought, as I do many times, oh, this would be a good idea for a book. Like uh, seven different kinds of love, or however many different kinds of love, and each kind of section of the book is love letters or love poems, but of those different kinds of love. So love poems to friends, and love poems to lovers, and love poems to family, and love poems to people I don't know. Philoxenia is the love of the other. This was kind of like an idea I had in the back of my head. And I did start to write something like that. Like I started to collect different love poems that I'd written and put them into these sections. And there's some Google Drive, Google Doc somewhere, that is that first original idea from many years ago.
Right.
And then I worked on this other ancient Greek thing called Odysseus, which is a retelling of the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey in hip hop and spoken word. And I worked on that for a few years, and we got to do some like showings of that, not really what I would call premiere. And and those showings were pretty successful, and we started applying for funding, and then the pandemic kind of hit around that same time. And so just as we were like taking off, we got hit with like, you know, impossible to tour something so big. It's, you know, it's a whole other story, but basically we wanted to do it with orchestra, and, you know, obviously at that time you're like, we want to have a choir in the show, and you couldn't even sing in a room together with
Yeah,
people that
yeah,
were like outlawing that at the time.
that's
So
fine.
so so around that same time I got commissioned by a festival in the Gold Coast, Bleach Festival, and a venue in Brisbane, La Boite Theatre. They asked me to write something new. And I had a few ideas. I had another ancient Greek myth of Narcissus, which is where the word narcissistic comes from. And I had this whole idea around that myth and how to tell it in a modern way. And then I had this idea, agape and other kinds of love. And they basically asked me, you know, like which one do you want to do most? You know, like because I presented them with like 3 or 4 different options.
Wow.
And I said, I think Agape is the one that I want to go with. So they gave me the first commission, which wasn't a lot of money or, you know, ability to finish a whole thing, but it was like enough for me to get paid to write something. And so I went overseas at the time to visit my wife's country of Chile, and I went there and wrote a lot of it there. And then I came back to Australia, and I was able to do a presentation of that, just me and a microphone at a cafe. And then we kind of started working towards another process of finishing writing that. And along around here, I found this book called Plato's Symposium,
Mm.
which is an ancient Greek text that was written by Plato, the ancient philosopher. And it is a recollection of a dinner party where a group of 7 different famous playwrights and poets and philosophers get together, and they come to the banquet or to the dinner party with a speech prepared, and they all had to prepare a speech about love. And they all say different things about love, and then it finally gets to Socrates's speech, and he's the famous, maybe the most famous philosopher, and he basically says, I learned everything I know about love from a woman named Diotima.
Right.
And so the greatest philosopher of all time is basically saying that a woman taught him everything he knows about love, and that his whole speech in the symposium is actually him just telling the table what she taught him. So Plato could have placed Diotima at the banquet table, because this recollection of this dinner is, you know, part fiction, we would say. It's definitely not counted as a complete work of non-fiction, like just a recording of the thing. So he could have just placed her there. But ancient Greece being a pretty sexist place, most symposiums, most gatherings like this were only occupied by men, and they were, you know, served by women basically at these things rather than having guests as women. So anyway, I found it typically kind of sexist and problematic that this amazing woman that must have been amazing to teach the greatest philosopher of all time about love isn't present at the symposium, and that deserves more of a voice. And we don't know a lot about her.
Yeah.
We know this mention of her in the symposium. We know that she lived in a place called Mantinea. We know that her name Diotima means that she worshipped Zeus, most likely. But you know, that could just be a name rather than actually a description of what she did with her life. And so we don't know a lot about her. So I decided that I wanted to steer my story that I was telling in the direction of Socrates tells this speech, but Socrates is actually in love with Diotima. It's not just that she taught him about love in an intellectual sense, but that they learnt about love together by being in love together. And then I wanted it to go in the direction of also talking about modern day society and how the different types of love might also be employed in, you know, today's times. And so basically, after a lot of writing, a lot of tussling, a lot of nights and days of fighting with these characters, the 2 companies that originally commissioned me to write this disappeared and said, sorry, you're on your own. We can't go through with the rest of the process. pandemic hit, I'm losing all of my work. Like I get all these emails that are just like cancel, 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 as everybody got.
Totally.
I have no idea what's going on. This half-written script is in the rubbish. And I'm just like, shit, like I've just put so much work into this thing and it's kind of half done. What am I gonna do? Like, do I labor with it or do I lay it to rest, because no one was gonna pay me to figure out how to finish it. And it's just one of those moments in an artist's life where, you just have to. I couldn't not write it. I felt like I was half of me. I feel like I was half finished.
Yeah, no,
Like,
I
I
totally.
felt like I was
Exactly.
in the
I
rubbish,
can't I
I
can't
put
even
so much love
imagine.
into this thing. So
Yeah.
basically, I ended up combining this idea of Socrates and Diotima from the symposium with this idea of the seven types of love. And I created these two other characters that are reincarnations of Socrates and Diotima in modern Greece.
Yeah.
And so the show flips and the book flips between ancient Greece, Socrates and Diotima being in love, modern Greece, Pavlos and Sophia being in love, and both couples have conversations and experiences of these seven different types of love,
Yeah.
culminating in the ultimate kind of love, which is agape, which is a universal type of love, which you would have heard in the show
Yeah.
Martin Luther King talked about. So that's kind of where I landed after many strange days and nights and also in the midst of the process of finishing writing, my wife got pregnant and we had our first son.
Yeah.
And I really don't think I could have finished this project without knowing what it feels like to be a father and what that love feels
Yeah.
like and how that deepens my love with my partner. And I would have been talking about it in a much more intellectual fashion, rather than actually, feeling it and knowing what it feels like. It's unlike anything else. So I definitely feel my son is in between the lines of this book and that experience. And yeah, finally I got it finished. Although I saw a quote recently from Leonardo da Vinci that says that, was it him? I think he says that, art is never finished, only abandoned. Like you never really. I still in the show, I still am tweaking things every time I perform it. But yeah, I finished the book. I sold it for the first time at the premiere of the show at the National Museum of Australia in Canberra, and yeah, we premiered it there, and it's a fucking beautiful, big, difficult,
Yeah. Yeah. I can
powerful,
only, you know what,
hectic monster that I have to wrestle to the ground every time I perform it. I feel like I'm wrestling with it. It's nice.
I can
It's
only
big.
imagine because seeing it and obviously hearing how it was all pieced together, it really is a labor of love. And of course, becoming a father in all of that, well, your emotions have shifted and your perspective has shifted from an us to, as in for yourself and your wife, and all of a sudden there's this little human that is just all encapsulating. So I think that was obviously all part of the destiny of this. But
Yeah.
so grateful that you did push on and that you did continue to do it because it's absolutely necessary to have um, something like this within our creative space right now with the way the world is at the moment too. I think and there's many different ways of being creative and expressing oneself, and even when we look at um, the thing that obviously links you and I is within our hip hop community here.
Mm.
I would never have imagined Greek theatre to be placed within the umbrella of hip hop, but
Mm.
that is part of who you are as well. I mean, you've been doing this for so long, Luca. People can Google you and all of your videos on YouTube and your music on Spotify. You are no you're no not you're no novice to this world. But I think it's
Yeah.
so important to,
Hip hop really is my first love. Like
yeah,
I didn't, I read some poetry when I was a kid, and I would say that words really have, hit me when I was young. But then in high school, you know, like I was listening to hip hop the whole way through, and I had Tupac poster on my wall for 10 years, and my whole world was like, you know, smoking cigarettes in the vacant lot across the road from the school and listening to Bone Thugs and being super fucking cheeky and in a lot of, you know, avoiding trouble constantly and getting myself into it a little bit more constantly. And so hip hop has been a foundation for me, and it's my first, definitely my first love as an artist. It's the first thing that I wrote, you know, for me that I can say was a piece of art rather than a diary entry, or you know, something that was more personal, something that the first thing I put out publicly
Mhm.
was hip hop music that got played by Maya Jupiter on the Triple J hip hop show. I remember I made a song and she played it, and I was like, "Fuck, okay." Um, and and from there I discovered slam poetry, and the first time I entered a slam, I entered with a rap that I just performed without the beat, and I came second in that slam, and I was like, okay, that was another little signpost along the way,
Right.
like, oh shit, all right, so hip hop is or rap is poetry, like, and I hated poetry at school because my teachers never made that bridge, they never made
Yeah.
that link between what I was listening in my headphones, you know, illegally in class. You know, I had my Discman back in the day, and I was listening to whatever, like a new Tupac album or something like that. That you know they released a few albums after he passed away, um and I was listening to those, and the teacher was trying to teach me Shakespeare or trying to teach me, you know,
Mm.
like assonance and alliteration and rhyme and narrative and all these things that were happening in the song in my headphones. I think for me, Brenda's Got a Baby, that track from Tupac was like the one that really made me feel like what edutainment can do, you
Yeah.
know, like what it can really be to like learn about someone else's life on the other side of the world, something that I never known about, teen pregnancy, or, you know, never really um, had to think about in my world. And he had taught me about that and entertained me through, you know, 3 minutes and 30 seconds of a song. And I was like, shit. And then I was like, oh, and he also has a book of rhyme. He has a book of poems, The Rose That Grew from Concrete. Okay. And in that book, he had a poem called In the Event of My Demise. And I had a poster on my wall that had Tupac's face on it, and it said, in the event of my demise, when I should live no more, I hope I die for a principle or a belief that I've lived for. And I didn't think, oh, I'm gonna be a poet or I'm gonna be a rapper. I was just like, that's fucking sick, you know. Like he just like articulated something that
Right.
resonated with me, and I guess that's where the activist in me kind of was given a bit of a push as well by his activist side, and that's probably why, you know, the majority of my early work is, you know, all very political, and I believe my work is still political, but I'm much less didactic. I'm much less like telling people how to be and how they should act and who they should vote for and how they should think and what they should and shouldn't do. Because I think I've lived long enough and to know that I'm super problematic. I'm a human being. I'm a complete, you know, I'm a complete what's the word? You know, I'm faulty. I have
Well,
faults. I have my contradictions within me.
yeah.
And so just as Tupac did, you know, when he had all those songs that were all just about sex and partying
Yeah.
and whatever else, he also had the real political side. And I love that he showed both of those sides. And I think my art now is, yeah, less didactic and more just like presenting
Yes.
everybody with the options and going, what do you think? I'm making art more from the perspective of asking people questions in themselves rather than telling them who they should be or how they should act. And I
Absolutely.
think that's for some people, I think that's a bit shocking. Like, I think that some people leave the theater going, fuck, I don't know how to feel about that because now I'm kind of implicated. I need
Yeah.
to make a decision.
Yeah.
And I think today with social media and the way certain things are going, I think activism has just become like a hashtag, you know, like if you say this thing right and this thing right and you use this way of saying it and you use this new language and you do this, then you are crushing it as an activist. Whereas for me, when I see that, I see a lot of people that are shallow actually and unable to self-reflect and unable to see how they are contributing to the problem. And if they're not contributing to that problem that they're fighting against, they are definitely contributing to another problem.
Absolutely.
You know, like be pro peace, but I don't know, like eat meat every day. And someone else could be vegan and be like, vegan is the way to save the world, but they are fucking assholes and they're racist. And they could, you know what I mean? Like there's so many intersections of different kinds of activism that
Absolutely.
we're all stepping on someone's toes. And so that's why I choose to kind of stay a bit more humble with the way that I talk about it and pursue my art to be the place where people find a field of questions to ask themselves.
Oh man,
Um,
that's a
I think
humble.
that's I don't know if that comes across in the
No,
work, but
no,
that's
no.
what I'm trying.
This that was, you know what, you couldn't have said it, you couldn't have said it better. You are, I've always found you to be incredibly humble about your work, and I'm still learning about your body of work, and I'm constantly inspired by the very activism that you've spoken about, because following you on social media, knowing you personally, having, experienced this really important work that we've been talking about, if you're not if you're not questioning things with art, I don't think it's hitting in the right places. But you've taught me a lot about just a glimmer or just a glimpse into your origin story, into your
Mm,
ancestry, into we think we know Greek history, we think we know things that we've been taught at school, but the way in which you've presented is a different perspective. And I think it's great to be able to go and have a conversation about that, and then also find out more about you as an artist. But I think authenticity would be the word that I would use
mm,
for you through and through, regardless whether you're rapping on stage, slam poetry, you know, watching you do your live theater. It's just authentic, and it's real. And I think within the world that we live today, especially in hip hop, Luca, like there's not a lot that's real. Everything is so fabricated, everything is so stilted towards how it looks on social media, how much is being influenced out there. The influence from you is just authenticity and truth, and I don't think you could ask for anything better than that. So that was my takeaway, absolutely. And
mm,
just from knowing your, you know, the essence of what it is that you do. So
mm.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's super important to me. My grandmother was who passed away only a couple of years ago, was really like a salt of the earth kind of person, you know.
yeah,
And that influenced me a lot, and especially when she passed away, I was like, wow, that's, you know, when I'm gone, how do I want people to remember me? You know, like do I want them to remember me? Well, first of all, I think it's important for me to just be authentic, and that leads naturally to feeling like you are a more grounded,
yeah.
warm, approachable, compassionate human being.
Mm,
And these are qualities that I think are really important. And I feel as though in through my activism, I was actually able to learn how not to be, because I began my journey in that as quite a, like I was saying, didactic, self-righteous kind of personality. And I went and I met lots of other activists in my time, and other rappers that were activists, and other musicians, and other, you know, people and academics and leaders and lots of people. I'm not going to name any names, of course, but because we're all faulty, and I'm not saying that I'm any better. But I learned, I saw in them traits, like human traits, that I was like, oh shit, I like, what's the point of being an activist on a certain topic, but then like not looking after your family,
yeah,
or treating
yeah,
them like shit, or treating your kids like shit, or you know what I mean, like treating people around you like shit because you're the savior, and so you know you're the one that deserves or whatever propping up, or you know being served because you're saving this other kind of person, or you're, you know, there's a lot of white, you know, this term of white savior. There's a lot of that in the world, but there's lots of different kinds of saviors in the world that prop themselves up to be higher than everyone else because they are self-righteous or living a self-righteous life or whatever it is. And over like years and years of traveling, I'm talking like a decade of traveling and meeting people and meeting my idols. And, they say you should never meet your idols. Um, I was kind of like, oh fuck, all right. I think that the journey of activism is just as importantly an internal journey. Like how do I walk into a room? How do I treat the 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 cleaner? How do I treat the rich person in the room? Because a lot of people treat rich people like shit just because they're rich. Like that's also a bullshit form of prejudice because it comes with a whole bunch of judgments that you don't know, and everybody does struggle in some way. There's no one that is completely um, completely saved from internal struggles or external struggles or family trauma or whatever it is. Yes, money will give you the opportunity maybe to heal a lot more or
Yeah,
to, obviously, like I understand that, but I've met a lot of people of all different echelons of life over the years of traveling and touring and doing all sorts of things with my life. And I'm lucky enough to say that I know I know a lot of different kinds of people, and I wouldn't know how to measure or predict that they would have trouble in their lives, in
yeah,
themselves. I wouldn't know how to predict which one would commit suicide and which one wouldn't. And
yeah,
I've had like lots of too many friends of mine take their lives, too many people I've known over the years take their lives. And I would not be able to say that, for instance, poverty was a
was the
marker
factor.
of
Yeah,
or a predictor. So uh yeah, over that time, I guess I just started feeling like, fuck, I really just need to, that finger that I'm pointing at the world, I need to point it at myself and do the work. And at the same time, not give up on um, creating art and presenting what I learned to the world and connecting with people and having fun and staying true to my path as an artist. I think the hardest thing is that for the past 12 years I've been a full-time poet as well as just, you know,
mm,
making the art and actually like now the last 3 years supporting a family and doing all these other things from the art, which can sometimes get in the way of the creativity because you're too busy hustling.
yeah.
But it was also like my dream from a long time to just be a hustler and raise money from the art. I
Yeah,
remember my friend Jive Poetic from New York. He would jump on the train and just perform poems and sell CDs of his spoken word or sell books of his spoken word. Like that was his hustle. He was like, and then he would, yeah, I've learned from some of the best hustlers. But yeah, I think that journey of being like really adamantly right and righteous from the beginning, and then having somehow the self-awareness to be like, oh fuck, actually this needs to be focused back on me and how can I just be the best person I can be
mm,
in every that I step in. And that is one of, I feel, the ultimate forms of activism. How do
mm.
I look after my son the best way I can? How do I have a healthy home? How do I, there's a saying that says everyone wants to protest and no one wants to wash the dishes. And I
Yeah.
feel like, and I hate washing dishes, but I'm
So
there, I'm
that's why
fucking
you're
doing
good
it,
at the
like
activism.
fucking doing it. But
I
yeah,
love
I
it. Yeah,
think
yeah.
I
I
think these are good questions to be asking for the future of our times.
Absolutely, absolutely. Listen, thank you so much for just a little glimpse into the mind and the thoughts of Luka Lesson. I mean, this is our first conversation, and I hope there will be many more to come. In fact, I know that there will be as your work continues, as your incredible art reaches and changes many lives. I just want to say thank you for your voice. Thank you for your fire. Thank you for your authenticity. And I'm so excited to see what more comes from that brilliant mind. But yeah, just, continued blessings to you, Luca. You're an incredible human. So very grateful to know you and have had you on my show. So thanks for your time, man.
Yeah, we'll do it again. And blessings to you and the fam. It
Thank
was
you.
good to meet everyone.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I'm very excited to see what happens next, and just what people are going to glean from your work as it slowly makes its way around Australia. So, best of luck with it all.
Thank you, my friend.
outside the sirens, called to the apartment, screaming in the gutters, whining in the darkness. An explosion hits 3 blocks away, and it hums like a reverberating prayer. The city wakes up and calls the fire brigades as he runs his hands through her hair. Their hearts start to burn as they turn in their feelings, not thinking of the gas bottles in the bottom of the building, or flames catching foundations, the water pipes getting hot. Her bedroom will be ablaze, but for now, their eyes are locked. She's on top, he's on top, she's on top. She peels off the last layer, double checks the door is locked. He holds her spine as she breathes him in. He admires her lines and the desires they bring. Their faces are exactly both grimaces and grins. Their souls start to cross over from the limits of their skin. Level 1 catches fire, the window cracks, ice melts off the roof and it drips like wax. They didn't notice when the floorboards shook, all the first waves of smoke, all the fallen books, all the fires that flickered, cause their eyes did the same. He spoke her name like a mantra, on his tongue was a flame. He opened up, forgot where he was. She closed her eyes and got lost with the guards. And outside another Molotov lands on a pavement. A cop car tries to make its way through the maze as a kid in a tracksuit and full balaclava holds his crutch to police in their full riot armor. Bottles fly as she bites on his shoulder. Her hair stuck with sweat and his touch feels older and known like home, like a wayward soldier returned after years but still knows how to hold her. She touched him way better than he ever touches himself. Sex is a language unwritten but eternally felt. She whispers, you really are a poet. You speak without speaking. He whispers, you really are a pilgrim. You seek without seeking. She grabs the nape of his neck as their rhythm increases. Their one breath collapses the past. How beautiful to fall in love together as the world falls apart. They catch their breath, stare out the window as the room fills with smoke. Though neither is suicidal or thinks it's a joke, they both thought of dying in that moment. What a fucking great time to go. He says it's time to go. They put back on their clothes, break out the window, climb down the outside fire escape to the road. The steel balustrade was hot but they hardly notice. Tear gas already makes it hard to focus. A petrol bomb bangs against a bus on the block.